Chapter 38. Calm before the storm. At a shooting range behind the training facilities, a crimson-haired boy stood holding a black gun with silver engravings. He pointed the gun at a large stone in the distance. Even though it was quite far, every detail of that stone was clearly visible in his crimson eyes. It was as if he could see miles away without needing a scope. Boom! With his left hand in his pocket, he fired with his right. The first shot pierced straight through the rock, nearly splitting it in half. The upper portion teetered, about to fall. Let's try area-wide damage using Omega Point. He adjusted his stance. Omega Point seed shot. Boom! The second shot didn't just destroy the stone, it obliterated it. The entire rock and the ground around it exploded into dust and debris. Damian lowered his gun, staring at the crater where the stone used to be. I can finally apply Omega Point to either make a concentrated attack or an area-wide destructive one. So much power, and this is only level 1. For the whole week, he'd spent every second trying to improve his weapon arts. He'd even acquired an eye skill to make sure he could see his targets without needing a scope. Status: Name Damian Valcor. Age 15. Rank E, right arrow E+. Talent S. Core attributes: Strength 45, right arrow 50. Speed 43, right arrow 50. Stamina 50, right arrow 51. Vitality 41, right arrow 53. Aura E, right arrow E+. Will 149. Skills: Shooting B+. Hand combat B. Telekinesis E+, right arrow D. Macro vision C. Aura control D, right arrow D+. Aura magnification 1 times. Weapon arts: Omega Point S, level 1. Abyssal Slaughter SS, initiated. After training for an entire week, his stats hadn't increased by much, but they were enough to advance him to E+ rank. Yes, Damian had advanced again in just a week's time. It wasn't that advancing was easy. His core had already been nearing E+ before, and after rigorous training, his physical attributes had caught up. But the most important gain was in controlling his aura. After Adrian told him he could take private classes from professors, Damian never went to regular class again, except for theory. He took private sessions from Professor Serafina and drastically improved his understanding and application of aura control. One benefit of having her all to himself was that she'd helped him reach aura magnification level 1. Meaning his aura would never be wasted. All of it now reflected effective combat strength. No waste, every drop counted. Serafina Vale had been more than happy to help Damian improve. He'd also learned the macro vision skill, which enhanced his eyesight to the point where he could see an ant clearly from 100 meters away. But the only thing that hadn't improved was his abyssal slaughter weapon arts. Even though he'd trained relentlessly, no change was reflected on the status screen. I should go meet Professor Blackwood later to understand the next levels of Omega Point, but for now, he holstered his gun. It's time to meet Professor Serafina. She told me yesterday to come by Saturday night. Damian quickly changed into an all-black suit and headed toward the professor's residential area. All professors had their own houses on the right side of campus. Even the mysterious headmaster had his residence there. Soon he arrived at Professor Serafina's house. Knock, knock. Come in. A lazy voice sounded from inside after a few moments. Damian entered and wasn't surprised to see the mess scattered everywhere. Sigh. He sighed as he carefully stepped around clothes, books, and empty coffee cups, making sure not to dirty his suit. Serafina was lying on her couch with her long black hair tied up in a messy bun and her violet eyes half closed. She was in her pajamas, sipping coffee like she had all the time in the world. I don't get your obsession with suits. A habit, is it? But from the information I've acquired about your entire life, it doesn't seem to be the case. Serafina's eyes gleamed with lazy curiosity. Sigh, Professor, you belong to a noble family as well. Can you at least maintain some cleanliness in your house? Damian sighed. His professor was the complete opposite of how she carried herself in front of her class. He still couldn't get over how dumbfounded he'd been when he first saw her living like this. What are you? My mother. Serafina stretched lazily, not minding at all that her curves were on full display in front of a teenager. Anyway, stop this bullshit about being noble. Coming from someone who's been declared the biggest enemy of nobles in the academy, it sounds pretty funny. Indeed, there seemed to be a campaign going on in the forums declaring him the enemy of all nobles. Even though he hadn't done anything against them, it felt like someone was deliberately fanning the flames. His performance in the gravity room had been leaked, which only sparked more conflict. Nobles from the senior years were starting to get involved as well. Some had even started personally guiding the nobles of his year in training. Clearly, they wanted to remove him from his rank and from the student council. Forget about all that. Serafina sat up, her lazy demeanor vanishing in an instant, her violet eyes locked onto his with sharp focus. Let's talk about the reason you're here. Are you sure you want to do this? Oh, yes. Damian paused for only a moment before replying resolutely. Serafina studied his face for a long moment, then sighed. Here's all the information the military has on the Shadow Council's activities in Tranquil City. She pulled out a thick file from under a pile of magazines and tossed it to him. I know you're strong and have already clashed with them multiple times, but going after them like this, you're declaring war. They already started it. Damian didn't reply. He caught the file and started reading through every page, eyes sharp, committing everything to memory to avoid any mistakes. If you decide to act, make sure to leave no trace behind. Serafina's voice was firm now, all traces of laziness gone. That therapist of yours is also quite active in the city, trying to dig up more information on them. I used many important connections to get this intel. Don't let my effort go to waste. She stood and walked toward the kitchen, then turned back to face him. Also, if even a single civilian gets hurt, you'll be the one responsible. I'll just pretend I had nothing to do with this. As soon as she finished speaking, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a key. She tossed it in Damian's direction. I know your bike was damaged and hasn't been repaired yet. Take mine this time. But I don't want it back completely destroyed, got it? Damian caught the keys midair and sat there for a few seconds, staring at them in his palm. Then he stood up and bowed slightly. Thank you for everything, Professor. I owe you a favor. Yawn, Serafina waved her hand dismissively as she walked to the door and practically shoved him out. Don't waste more of my time. I want to get some sleep. The door shut behind him with a soft click. Damian stood there for a moment, staring at the keys in his hand. Then he turned and walked into the night, Tranquil City. Night had fallen, and the streets were quieter now. Only a few stragglers wandering about under the dim glow of streetlights. Damian pulled up on the bike at the entrance of Old Man Mike's shop and killed the engine. He dismounted and headed straight inside. As soon as he entered, he saw Alessio, the beggar he'd named after his past self. Unlike his former self, the boy looked healthy now. There were no signs of malnourishment visible anymore. His cheeks had filled out and his skin had regained some color. Currently, he sat cross-legged on the floor, reading a book with an intensely serious expression on his face. You learn fast. Hearing Damian's voice, Alessio was startled and looked up sharply. Master. The boy immediately scrambled to his knees, bowing his head. What did he just call me? Get up, Damian's voice was low and firm. "I'm not your master, Alessio. Don't call me that. My name is Damian Valcor." He had no idea why the kid was calling him master, but he didn't like the sound of it at all. Alessio looked up at him with wide, earnest eyes. "Master Damian, you saved my life. I have nothing to give you in return. I read in the books that when someone saves your life and you have nothing to offer, the only thing you can offer is yourself." He spoke with an expression that made it clear he believed this was the only right thing to do. Damian was completely speechless. He muttered under his breath, "What kind of books is that old man making him read?" "Don't put the blame on me." A familiar voice came from behind the counter. "That's a very weird kid you brought. But at least he knows how to repay kindness." Damian turned to see old man Mike standing there with his usual butler-like suit and ash-gray hair, a knowing smile on his face. "But I have to say, you really do have an eye for talent. That kid learns extremely fast in just a week. He's learned to read and write fluently." "I don't have any eye for talent." Damian's expression remained flat as he walked closer to the counter. "I just don't like seeing kids go hungry." "You'd be surprised to know about that kid's talent as well." Mike leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "After he learned to read and write, the first thing I did was ask him about his talent and age that was displayed on his status screen. Turns out he has an S-grade talent, almost the best a commoner could ever have." "How old is he?" Damian didn't comment on Alessio's talent. He'd never helped the boy expecting anything in return. 14. Huh. Damian turned sharply toward Alessio, who had already gone back to reading his book diligently, completely absorbed. He looked so small. He didn't look like he was just a year younger at all. "Well, the kid was severely malnourished when you brought him to me." Mike's tone softened with pity. "And although his body has started to recover and become healthier, I don't know if his growth was permanently stunted. He might never reach a normal height." Old man Mike spoke with genuine sympathy on his face. Damian stayed silent for a moment, his jaw tightening slightly. Then he shifted his gaze back to the old man. "Forget about all that for now. I came to give you a heads up in case your friends get caught up in what's about to happen tonight." Mike didn't say anything immediately, but a slow smile began spreading across his face. "I see, it seems you figured some things out." He chuckled softly. "Don't worry, no one will interfere with your actions tonight. My friends know better than to get in the way." He leaned forward slightly, his expression turning more serious. "But be careful. Unlike last time when I warned you, the number of people who have arrived in the city these past few days is far greater. And they all have questionable backgrounds." Damian listened silently, carefully picking up every piece of information from the old man's words. "I understand, but will I have any problems with your friends because of this?" "Oh, not at all." Mike waved his hand dismissively. "In fact, my friends would appreciate it if you could handle these pests that have sprung up in our garden. You see, even though my friends could take care of them, the amount of trouble it would bring us later would be far too troublesome to deal with." Mike seemed even more eager than Damian about what was about to unfold. But his eyes narrowed slightly. "Can you even handle them? Don't misunderstand me, I don't doubt your potential. But a seed that hasn't been watered enough finds it difficult to sprout beautiful flowers. And the pests that have come, they specialize in killing the buds before they even bloom." "Old man," Damian's expression deadpanned. "Have you gone senile with old age? Just talk like a regular person, would you? And you don't need to worry about anything. I just came to give you a heads up." The smile on Mike's face froze mid-expression. But before he could respond, Damian had already turned on his heel and was walking out of the shop. The door swung shut behind him with a soft chime. "Sigh, young people these days have no respect for old folks." Mike sighed heavily, shaking his head, but then his playful expression faded entirely. He reached beneath the counter and pulled out an old-looking mobile device, its screen scratched and worn. He pressed a button and brought it to his ear. "I have a young friend who will be going after the insects making noise in the city tonight." His voice was calm, but there was an edge of authority in it now. "Make sure the SFD and police are kept occupied until he finishes. And move the people who were keeping an eye on those insects away from the area. I don't want any of them getting caught up in this." The voice on the other end seemed to give an affirmation. Mike hung up and placed the phone back under the counter. He glanced toward Alessio and noticed the boy was already looking back at him with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Don't worry, kid. Your master is strong." Mike's expression softened slightly. "You should focus on understanding the world better for now. Next year, I plan to send you to the academy." Alessio nodded, and a resolute expression settled onto his young face. He clenched his small fists. "I'll get stronger, strong enough to stand beside Master Damian one day." Damian let his bike remain parked at the shop's entrance. Instead, he pulled on the dark helmet to hide his identity, just in case. Although he didn't necessarily need to hide his face, he also wanted to avoid unnecessary trouble if possible. If they figured out it was him, fine. They'd already clashed before. It was nothing new. As Damian walked toward his destination, the streets grew quieter. Shadows stretched longer under the sparse streetlights. He tapped his watch. "Echo, how long would it take for the police to reach the Spire district once they're alerted?" "Approximately 10 minutes for them to respond and arrive on the scene." Echo's mature, feminine voice sounded from his watch, calm and analytical. Damian's crimson eyes narrowed beneath the helmet. Let's first take out the ones who are alone, quick and clean." He cracked his knuckles and disappeared into the darkness. In the document given by Professor Serafina, it was mentioned that members of the Shadow Council were staying in Sigmund Hotel, and their main base of operations was the top floor of the Quinton skyscraper next to it. Only at night time would almost all the members of the Shadow Council branch of Tranquil City gather to discuss their plans at the top floor. But there were a few exceptions, of course. The one who ran the base of operations in the daytime, a man by the name of Thomas Vander, would usually take his time off at night, along with some of his subordinates. Today was one such day. After getting tired of the daily operations, Thomas was lying in his bathtub with a glass of wine placed on the side. Tig asterisk. He was wearing a white robe, listening to the music, when he suddenly heard the door of his bathroom click open. "I didn't order any room service, so don't bother me in my time of peace." He didn't even look behind as his eyes remained closed. He was very tired from making arrangements for all members to arrive and settle easily in this city. But after some time passed by, he still didn't hear the sound of the door closing. Feeling irritated, he turned his head around to yell at the stupid room service guy, but as soon as he turned around, a sharp glass pierced his right eye. Larg! As he was writhing in pain, he felt someone grab his hair and pull his head up. A guy in a black suit wearing a helmet and holding a gun with his other hand entered his sight. Who are you?" A few minutes earlier. As soon as Damian entered the Sigmund Hotel, he went to a room on the ground floor, where one of the members of Shadow Council was meant to keep an eye on everyone coming and going out of the hotel. Knock, knock. Damian knocked on the door and placed his right ear on it. As soon as he heard someone about to reach the door, he kicked the door open. Bam! The door hit the guy who was about to open the door, but before he could shout, Damian released his aura and closed his mouth with one of his hands. He used his other hand to repeatedly punch the guy's neck with aura infused in those punches. His hand combat skill was coming to clear use in this situation. His aura was so concentrated that no amount of it was wasted. It was all thanks to his aura magnification reaching 1x level. Soon that guy stopped breathing. He was an E-ranked enemy, but Damian's actions were so practiced that he didn't even give the poor guy a chance to release his aura. One down, let's speed it up. Damian then calmly left the room and closed the door before heading towards the lift. He clicked the button to the top floor, as that whole floor was booked by the Shadow Council members. Only one of their members was on the ground floor currently, as all others were in the skyscraper next to this hotel. There should be about 4 or 5 enemies on the top floor, alongside a high-level target named Thomas Vander. As soon as the lift's door opened, Damian came face to face with one of the members of the Shadow Council. Before that guy reacted, Damian grabbed his collar and pulled him inside the lift. But clearly, this opponent was not someone easy to deal with. When Damian started using his aura, the enemy reacted in time and did the same. Both of them were locked in close combat, where Damian's hand combat skills, high level, finally showed some value. Using his macro vision, he found the enemy's weak points and quickly retaliated. But the enemy was a D-ranked opponent. Even though Damian has the situation under his control, he was still losing crucial time before others reacted. So he pulled out his gun with one hand and held the enemy's mouth open with the other. Then, bam! Before he could shout, Damian inserted the gun in his mouth and shot. Blood and brain matter splattered on the walls of lift as Damian stood up and adjusted his clothes. Good thing my gun was modified by Professor Blackwood. The gun itself made no noise after shooting, but the noise of aura bullets hitting the target couldn't be suppressed. The sound of the head bursting had still managed to alert an enemy who was heading towards the lift. Don't move. Damian lifted his hands in a mock surrender as the enemy pointed his own gun towards him. But before the enemy could shoot his gun, a knife pierced his throat from behind. Pudge. Gurgle. Damian walked towards the falling guy as he clutched the knife and let the poor guy fall to the ground. Telekinesis is strong as well, although I need to increase its level more. If this guy was a C-ranked enemy, my knife wouldn't have pierced so easily. The enemy who had pointed his gun at Damian was a D-ranked awakened, and his own telekinesis skill was D-ranked as well. That's why he was able to penetrate his defenses with a surprise attack so easily. Damian started walking towards the direction of Thomas Vander's room, and as soon as he arrived at his desired location, he saw Thomas's guard standing outside, drinking wine. He infused his aura in the knife he was holding and threw it with the greatest force he could muster. Pudge. The knife pierced through the throat of the first guard and was lodged directly at the forehead of the other smaller-in-height guard. Arg! The guy whose throat was pierced through stood holding his throat as Damian shoved him away by his face as he got closer. Before entering the room, Damian waved his hand as a piece of glass from the broken wine glass came floating to his hand. Back to the present time. Who are you? For a C-rank awakened like him, I guess I need to use Omega Point weapon art. His skin must be thick after all. Omega Point. Before Thomas could react, Damian pointed his gun at him as he held his head up with the other hand and shot. Bam! Omega Point was clearly very powerful, as Thomas's whole head burst apart like a watermelon. Blood and brain matter spread across the room, as Damian's suit was also drenched with it. Tusk, another good suit wasted. Damian clicked his tongue as he tried to remove the brain matter from his coat, using Thomas's robe. Now that these guys are taken care of, better move to the main dish before they react. He headed towards the terrace of the hotel through the stairway. Cold winds hit his face as he removed his helmet, and looked at the top floor of the skyscraper next to the hotel. Using his macro vision skill, he saw about 23 people gathered there having a meeting. Their strength ranged from E+ rank to C rank. Inside the top floor of the skyscraper, the branch head of the Shadow Council, Lumion Wade, sat at the head seat. He looked at the people who were sent by the higher-ups recently in order to kill a Stormhold Academy student named Damian Valcor. According to the intel he received, this student was the one who managed to ruin their attempt at Norrington School previously. And he was also the one who counter-killed the squad that was sent to silence him last week. So, the higher-ups decided to send so many of you, including some ranked awakeners, just to silence a kid who is at most an E-rank awakened. Is this a joke? Lumion was agitated. For the past few months, he had been working silently to build a branch for the organization secretly in this city. But ever since the failed ambush last week, SFD and the police had started monitoring them. All his hard work was ruined, thanks to these incompetent fools who couldn't take care of a recently awakened kid. Don't underestimate him, Lumion. We have already paid a price because of that. One fat-looking man seated at the end of the table spoke in a cautionary tone. Ridiculous. Headman, you have clearly lost your edge over the years. Just look at yourself. You have become scared of a boy who just entered the world. What? Do you think that guy is so powerful that he can kill me? Heh, I dare him to even sent. Bam! Everyone watched as Lumion's head exploded before he could finish his sentence, in utmost terror. What? Where did the shot come from? Quick, open the door and run. Bam! Before the fat guy named Headman could even open the door, his head also burst apart as well. No! Hide behind the table. Call Thomas and ask for reinforcement. I don't want to die. Is the SFD after us? Panic filled the room as everyone tried to find a safe place to hide. Damian stood at the terrace of the hotel as he holstered the gun at his waist. The Tranquil City branch of the Shadow Council was finished. He has killed everyone who has entered the city these past few days. It seems this organization is much more powerful than everyone assumes. Even a branch head was already a C-ranked awakened. I need to get stronger faster. They will realize one day that it was me who killed this branch. But my hunt has only now begun. I won't rest until I slaughter each and every one of them. As these thoughts ran through his mind, he put the helmet back on and started heading down from the hotel rooftop. When he stepped out of the elevator, a small crowd had already gathered on the ground floor around the room where he'd killed the first target. Hearing the sound of the elevator doors opening, all of them turned to look at Damian. Silence. The floor fell into utter silence as people held their breath. What caught their eye was Damian's suit that was drenched in blood. Dark crimson stains covered his chest, sleeves, and collar. It was painfully clear that the one responsible for the disturbance tonight was standing right in front of them, in the flesh. As Damian walked past them toward the exit, his boots leaving faint red footprints on the polished floor, almost all of them released the breaths they'd been holding subconsciously. Someone's hands trembled. Another stepped back instinctively. Was he the one? I don't know about the guy on the ground floor. This body doesn't even have any blood on it. You're telling me there are more murders? Call the police now. The voices rose in panic behind him, but Damian didn't turn around. Damian didn't care about the people gathered in the hotel. His job was done, and he went straight back to Old Man Mike's shop. Tick. Hearing the door open and seeing Damian arrive with clothes soaked in blood, Mike raised an eyebrow. Are you done already? That was fast. He sounded genuinely surprised. It had only been 20 minutes since Damian left the shop. Do you have some clothes I can change into? Damian looked down at his ruined suit as he walked toward Mike. Also, give me a set of clothes I can wear for these types of special occasions. Something durable. Sure thing, I already prepared a set for you, figured you'd need it. Mike gestured toward the back. Go to the changing room. Also, when you're done, come to the terrace. I have some things to discuss. Damian nodded and disappeared into the changing room. When Damian arrived on the terrace of the shop, he found a small table with drinks already placed on it. Alessio stood quietly to the side of the table, ready to serve them. Damian sat down across from the old man and looked up toward the night sky. The stars were dim tonight, drowned out by the city lights. Is that the skyscraper you went to? Mike spoke after taking a slow sip of his drink, gesturing toward the towering building in the Spire district. Damian waited for Alessio to fill his glass, then drank it all in one gulp. His face immediately twisted. What kind of drink is this? Looking at the sour expression on Damian's face after downing the alcohol, Mike chuckled. It's very strong. For high-ranking awakeners, normal stuff doesn't work anymore. So as time passed, some strong stuff was made for us as well. This one's called the Phoenix. One glass of it can make even an A-rank expert feel dizzy. I see. Only then did Damian shift his gaze toward the skyscraper in the distant Spire district. I didn't enter that building. I just shot them all down from the hotel next to it. Is that so? Mike looked a bit troubled as he kept staring toward the top floor of that building, his expression unreadable. What is it? Damian asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. Well, Mike sighed heavily. I'm afraid those guys had some compromising information about a few of my friends with them. Now that the police will arrive soon, I'm worried things might become troublesome for them. As Mike laid his worries bare, he continued to drink slowly, swirling the liquid in his glass. So what is it that you wanted to talk about? Damian asked him directly. Mike stayed silent for a while, staring into his drink. Then he looked up, meeting Damian's crimson eyes with a serious gaze. I'll be completely honest with you, young Sir Damian. He set his glass down carefully. I underestimated you before. Previously, I thought it would take you a long time before you could even reach a stage where I'd consider you an equal. But now, he gestured vaguely toward the city. Looking at your growth, it seems it won't be long before you outgrow the need to even consider me and my friends as useful. Mike leaned back in his chair. Your potential was already high in my eyes, but at just E+ rank, you can take out C-ranked enemies so easily. So I was hoping you could come meet my friends whenever you have some time. That is, if you have any plans regarding the underworld. It seemed Mike was finally dropping the act of being just an ordinary shop owner. Sorry to disappoint you, old friend. Damian's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. Although I do have some plans, I don't think you or your friends would be happy about them. I don't plan on being part of the underworld. He leaned forward slightly, his crimson eyes gleaming in the dim light. I will be the underworld. Silence spread between them like a physical weight. The air became tense, heavy. Alessio, standing off to the side, felt uncomfortable. The tension was clearly visible on his young face. Ever since he'd been brought here by Damian, he'd gotten to know many things about the smiling old man named Mike. Although the man was very dangerous, he had been kind to him. And then there was Damian, the one whom Alessio had vowed to serve for his entire life. Now, seeing the tense atmosphere between both of them, Alessio didn't know what to feel. His hands clenched at his sides. As if sensing his discomfort, Damian glanced toward him with a small smile on his face, as if to say there's no need to worry. Alessio relaxed slightly. You clearly have a big appetite, my young friend. Mike's voice was flat now, devoid of warmth. But do you have what it takes to make those words come true? Or are you just becoming arrogant after taking down some ants? Damian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up the bottle of Phoenix and poured his glass full again. Then he downed it in one gulp, the burn spreading through his chest. He stood up. Strong winds rustled his new clothes, and his crimson hair swayed in the direction of the breeze. He walked toward the edge of the terrace and pulled out his gun. What is he planning to do? Mike and Alessio exchanged confused looks as they watched him point his gun toward the distant skyscraper. Damian felt intoxicated, not just from the alcohol but from something else as well. It was as if someone had finally lifted his restraints, set him free. The sounds of police sirens were already ringing throughout the city. They must have been alerted by the hotel staff by now. You're worried about your friend's information getting into the hands of the police, right? Damian didn't look at Mike as he said that, his back turned toward both of them. He pointed his gun toward the top floor of the skyscraper, where the main base of the Shadow Council's operations was located. Yes, Mike answered, confusion written all over his face. Damian didn't respond. Instead, he started pouring all his aura into the gun. The weapon began to glow faintly, energy crackling along the barrel. Omega point. He focused all his intent, all his willpower, into the bullet forming at the tip of the barrel. Then he pulled the trigger. A bright flash lit up the night sky of Tranquil City like a second sun. A split second later, a deafening thundering sound reverberated across the entire city, shaking windows and scaring countless people awake from their sleep. Boom! The top floor of the skyscraper exploded in a massive fireball. Flames and debris erupted outward, and a gigantic mushroom cloud of fire and dust formed where the top floor used to be. How beautiful, tilde tilde. Damian had a wide smile on his face as he watched the destruction unfold. The firelight reflected in his crimson eyes, making them glow like embers. The sight was burned into their minds, Damian standing there, smiling, silhouetted against the massive mushroom cloud of fire in the distance. Mike and Alessio stood rooted to the spot, utterly speechless. Damian holstered his gun and turned around, walking past them casually. The favor I owe you is repaid now. His voice was calm, almost cheerful. I look forward to meeting your friends. He walked off the terrace without looking back. Madness. Mike sighed deeply, still staring at the burning building in the distance. His expression was complex, part admiration, part concern, part something else entirely. The younger generation is becoming far more dangerous than we ever were. What he didn't notice was the almost crazed look in Alessio's eyes. The boy stared at the distant flames, his hands trembling not from fear but from something else. I want this power. His small fists clenched tight. I want to stand beside him. I want to become someone he can rely on. The fire reflected in his young eyes, burning just as brightly. Damian started the bike and headed back toward the university. Along the way, he saw many police vehicles rushing past him, all heading toward the Spire district. Completely unaware that the one responsible for all the chaos was casually riding right by them. Phoenix, was it? That's some good stuff. I'll get that old man to give me a few bottles. Even the most expensive alcohol he'd had in his past life wasn't even 10% as strong as this. I feel so alive. Ever since Damian had awakened his past memories, he'd felt suffocated, like he was drowning in responsibilities, threats, and the weight of 2 lifetimes pressing down on him. Only a few weeks had passed, but it felt like an eternity thanks to the different situations he'd found himself in. For the first time in a while, he actually felt good. But it was hard to tell whether it was the alcohol loosening his restraints, or the fact that he'd finally retaliated against his enemies. The Shadow Council had been lurking in the back of his mind ever since they'd tried to hurt his sister. Knowing the enemy was still out there, actively coming after him, didn't sit well with him at all. Even though the majority of them were still out there, at the very least, destroying one branch was a start. Next goal, let's annihilate each and every branch they have in the central region. But he needed more people. The Shadow Council was just one organization among many. To go after the entire underworld, he needed to create his own power base, his own force. Yes, Damian planned to go after the entire underworld. When he'd been talking with Mike earlier, he hadn't just been talking big. He really did intend to control the entire underworld, just like he used to in his past life. But all of that's for the future. For now, let's focus on academy matters. Starting Monday, the clubs would begin recruiting. Let's see if Edrin and the others actually call me or not. He wanted to see how serious these talented commoners were about this whole social construct thing. For him, it didn't really matter what the nobles or commoners did, as long as they didn't get in his way. But that didn't change the fact that he'd take full advantage of the current situation for his own benefit. And knowing the arrogance of those nobles, they'll surely do something stupid against me sooner or later. Elizabeth and Liam were smart enough to handle the third years and keep them from interfering for now. Gareth and Ariel also seemed without any bias toward him, and their batch was already in their final year. They clearly wouldn't have enough time or motivation to mess with him. So that left the idiot from the second year, Victor. Let's see how that plays out. As Damian was occupied with his thoughts, the academy gates came into view. It was very late at night, so he found no one roaming the campus. The pathways were empty, lit only by the occasional lamp post. He drove the bike straight toward Professor Serafina's house. To Damian's surprise, Serafina was standing outside her door, arms crossed, as if she'd already known he was about to arrive. As soon as he stopped the bike and got off, her voice rang out sharply. "Come inside." Damian said nothing as he followed her in. Inside the house, the holographic TV was on. And on the screen, live news was being broadcasted. Breaking news. Just half an hour ago, Tranquil City, where Stormhold Academy is located, was shaken awake by a thundering blast. The explosion occurred on the top floor of the Quinton skyscraper, where reportedly many people had gathered for a meeting. But we believe this was not an ordinary blast. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a flash of light strike the building, followed by the massive explosion. Clearly, this was an attack carried out by a high-ranking Awakener. The SFD has released no information so far, but we've also uncovered one more shocking development. The Sigmund Hotel, located next to Quinton's skyscraper, reported 6 murders just before the attack. Police have identified an unidentified man dressed in a suit and wearing a black helmet as the primary suspect. Only one image of the suspect was recovered, as he was leaving the building covered in blood. The reporter went on to display a blurred image of Damian exiting the hotel, his silhouette barely visible through the distortion. Serafina muted the TV and turned to look at Damian, who was seated casually across from her. "What?" Damian asked with a confused expression, genuinely unbothered. While I appreciate the fact that my student was capable enough to take out several C-ranked enemies all by himself, while being only an E+ rank Awakener himself, I don't recall ever telling him to do so in such a flashy manner. Serafina's voice dripped with annoyance. "It's just a blast. They'll forget about it soon enough." Damian waved his hand dismissively, as if the incident was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "What happened to you? You're acting differently." Serafina's violet eyes narrowed with suspicion as she studied him. He always behaved seriously, constantly lost in thought. He'd even complained about the mess in her house before, But now, he looked completely unbothered, relaxed even. His usual tense posture was gone. Sniff a sniff. Suddenly, Serafina caught a familiar scent. Her eyes widened slightly. She stood up abruptly, leaned forward and grabbed Damian by the collar, pulling his face closer to hers as she sniffed him. What are you doing?" Damian looked genuinely startled by the sudden closeness and bizarre action. "You're drunk." Serafina's face went through a vivid range of expressions: shock, disbelief, irritation, as she stared at him. "So that's why you're acting so weird. Did you go out to kill your enemies or to party? And who the hell let you drink at your age?" "There's a fucking drinking restriction for 15-year-olds. Who was stupid enough to make such ridiculous rules? We're allowed to carry weapons and kill people, but we can't drink. And you're worried about me drinking, but you let me go kill a bunch of terrorists. Hey, Professor, I think you've got issues with your head as well. Let's go see that SFS therapist together." Damian replied with a drunk, lazy expression on his face. Clearly, the Phoenix was now fully hitting him. "Why you fucking?" Serafina looked absolutely flabbergasted. Although she knew he was drunk, she couldn't deny the fact that everything he just said somehow seemed to make sense. She let go of his collar and sat back down, crossing her arms with an irritated look on her face. "That's not the issue, you idiot." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "These past few years have been very peaceful for the Federation, but now you just blasted a building in the center of a major city. And not just any city, it just happened to be the one where Stormhold Academy is located. It's bound to attract a lot of negative attention and reputation. If the headmaster finds out about this, he'll be furious." "Who's gonna tell him?" "You," Damian smirked lazily. "Relax a little, would you? I'm your professor. Show some damn respect at least." Serafina leaned back on the sofa and eyed him sharply. "Also, why the hell did you let them capture a photo of you? Don't you have a brain? You're supposed to destroy surveillance before you do shady stuff. And that's why you're a professor and I'm a student. See, I learned a valuable lesson." Damian grinned. "Ah, don't make that face. I'm just joking. I wasn't caught by any CCTV cameras. It was probably just one of the people in the lobby who snapped a photo right when I was leaving. Don't worry, it's blurry as hell. There's no major issue." "You?" Serafina sighed in complete defeat as she looked at the thoroughly drunk Damian sitting across from her. Gurgle. Damian's stomach made a loud noise, interrupting her thoughts. "Sigh, wait here and sit quietly. My head's already hurting enough." She stood up and headed toward the kitchen. Since it was late at night, all the shops would be closed by now, so she decided to let him eat here. He was clearly in no state to fend for himself right now. But when she came out of the kitchen carrying a plate of food, she found him already passed out on her couch, his head tilted awkwardly to the side. Sigh. Serafina set the plate down on the table and went to grab a blanket from her room. She draped it over him carefully, making sure he was covered. Then she stood there silently for a moment, staring down at his messy crimson hair. She reached down and gently adjusted his posture so he wouldn't wake up with a sore neck. Then she brushed his hair away from his face. "This kid looks a lot cuter when he's quiet." She smirked faintly. Note to self, don't let him get drunk again. She turned off the holographic TV, dimming the room into soft darkness, and walked back to her bedroom. But she paused at the doorway, glancing back at him one more time. "Sometimes I even forget he's still just a kid." She shook her head and closed the door behind her. The next morning, Damian woke up feeling like his head was about to split open. Arg! He clutched his head with both hands, squinting against the harsh sunlight streaming through the window. "Wakey, wakey, Tilda, my dear student." Serafina's teasing voice reached his ears, dripping with amusement. He turned to the side to see her sitting lazily on a chair, holding a cup of coffee in her hands. She was still in the same pajamas she'd worn last night. Looking at her messy black hair and half-lidded eyes, it was clear she'd just woken up too. Wait, something's not right. And that's when it hit him. He'd passed out drunk last night, at Professor Serafina's house. Oh no! Looking at the changing expressions flickering across Damian's face as he clearly recalled the events of the previous night, the smile on Serafina's face stretched even wider. Sigh, I really feel sad about myself. She placed a hand dramatically over her heart. I, an S-plus ranked awakener, a former battlefield general, have such an irresponsible drunkard for a student. Oh, how low I have fallen, tilde tilde. She waved her hand theatrically, putting on an exaggerated expression of despair. Please stop it, Professor. Damian felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. It was his first time drinking the special alcohol of this world. How was he supposed to know it would be that strong? Go to the kitchen. Serafina dropped the act and pointed lazily toward the other room. I made you some lemonade earlier for your hangover. Damian stood up, stumbling slightly as the room spun. Then he tripped over a pile of books scattered across the floor. It's fucking, he muttered under his breath as he hit the ground with a thud. Hearing the sound, Damian whipped his head around sharply, glaring at Serafina, only to see her calmly drinking her coffee with a completely serious expression on her face. I can hear you, you know. Damian grumbled internally as he picked himself up. Gulp, gulp. With an irritated expression, he made his way to the kitchen and downed the lemonade in one go. The sour taste cut through the fog in his head slightly, though the pounding headache remained. But as he stood there holding the empty glass, fragments of last night's conversation with Professor Serafina started coming back to him. Oh no, oh no, no, no. I should run back to my dorm before she remembers everything I said. With that panicked thought racing through his mind, Damian quickly returned to the living room. Thank you for taking care of me yesterday, Professor. He spoke quickly, avoiding eye contact. I just remembered that I have my therapy session with that officer from the SFD today. I need to head back to my dormitory and prepare for it, so I'll get going now. Without waiting for Serafina to say anything, Damian practically bolted for the door. Watching him flee like his life depended on it, Serafina didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She clearly knew what was running through his mind. I'll punish him later when he comes seeking guidance on aura control. She took another sip of her coffee, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. Though the reason Damian had given for his hasty escape was clearly just an excuse, it was indeed true that he had his first therapy session today. Aiko had informed him about the notification when it arrived earlier in the week. Though I wonder if Officer Brian even slept last night. According to Professor Serafina, Officer Brian Olaf had already been in Tranquil City yesterday evening. He'd gone there to investigate the Shadow Council and identify their members. And now that their entire branch had been obliterated by someone unknown, he must have stayed up the entire night trying to figure out who the culprit was. Poor guy. Damian got cleaned up, changed into fresh clothes, and grabbed something quick to eat before heading toward the counseling room assigned by the Academy for their sessions. After all, the Academy had to keep an eye on the SFD as well, to make sure they didn't use therapy as an excuse to interrogate their students under the guise of mental health care. This arrangement had been personally ordered by the mysterious headmaster, whom Damian still hadn't met. It was really surprising. The headmaster never paid attention to academy matters. Most students hadn't even seen the headmaster in person. It was rumored that he was one of the few SS-ranked experts the Federation had, hence the secrecy around his identity. And for such a high-profile figure to show interest in his matters, that was definitely unusual. Damian entered the counseling room, actually looking forward to meeting Officer Brian this time. Unlike previous encounters where his mood had soured thanks to the SFD's interference, this time he was feeling downright pleasant knowing they were having a terrible day thanks to him. As soon as Damian stepped inside, he saw Officer Brian sitting at a small table, holding a coffee cup and reading through some documents. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his uniform looked slightly wrinkled. "Looks like you've been very busy since last night, officer," Damian said in a teasing voice as he took his seat across the table. Brian looked up from the documents to see the unusually cheerful expression on Damian's face. He replied in a tired, worn-out voice, "And you clearly had a happy one." "And why would that be?" Damian put on an innocent, confused expression, as if he had absolutely no idea what was going on. "Funny, isn't it?" Brian leaned back in his chair, watching Damian carefully. "An entire branch of the Shadow Council was destroyed last night, but for years the SFD has been trying to catch their members to no avail." He looked at Damian with meaningful eyes. "Oh, something like that happened." Damian widened his eyes in mock surprise. "That's really good to know, but it's curious, isn't it? Why was the SFD, one of the best departments in the entire Federation, not able to find out about the whereabouts of such a minor criminal organization?" Before Brian could reply, Damian leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the table. "I can only think of 3 scenarios in this situation. First, the SFD is really incompetent." He held up one finger. "Second, the Shadow Council is actually a very strong power hiding in the shadows." He held up a second finger. "And third—" Damian paused deliberately, then leaned even closer across the table and whispered softly, as if sharing a dangerous secret. "There are some people inside the SFD trying to protect the Shadow Council." Silence. The room fell completely silent, save for the sound of Brian's rough, uneven breathing. Brian Olaf had been part of the SFD for many years. He joined the department as soon as he graduated from the academy, feeling immensely proud of his achievements. He was one of those people who'd always wanted to bring justice to common folk, a strict adherent to rules and duty. He wouldn't even hesitate to sacrifice his own life to save the people of the Federation. He was many things, but if there was one thing he definitely wasn't, it was a fool. Ever since Brian had become involved in investigating the crimes of the Shadow Council across the Federation, he'd been having a very bad feeling about it all. He'd seen stronger and more powerful criminal organizations crumble before the SFD very quickly. Efficiently dismantled, their leaders arrested, their operations shut down. But this particular organization, it felt like every lead they followed turned into a dead end almost immediately. The Shadow Council itself hadn't shown power greater than C rank so far, and yet they seemed to evade the SFD every single time, like ghosts. He'd already started suspecting foul play was involved. But hearing those words from the kid sitting across from him felt like a bucket of ice-cold water being dumped over his head. Could it really be? Brian's face underwent a series of emotional shifts: shock, anger, suspicion, denial, before he finally tried to calm himself down and regain his composure. "Let's forget all this." He cleared his throat and shuffled the documents in front of him. "We're here to start your therapy sessions. You might not know this, but I actually do have a degree in psychology as well. Maybe use that degree to figure out the traitors in your own department first." Damian replied in a lazy, almost bored tone as he leaned back against his chair. "Can you please just talk normally with me for once?" Brian put on a helpless expression. "It's like every time you open your mouth, poison comes out of it." "Truth is like bitter poison, officer." Damian's crimson eyes met his evenly. "The sooner you learn that, the less disappointed you'll be." Brian sighed deeply, then just closed his eyes and rested his head on the table in defeat. He was already exhausted from last night, and talking with Damian felt mentally draining every single time. Damian suddenly stood up. "Let's go to the cafeteria and get some coffee. You clearly need more of it." He gestured toward the door. "Anyway, all we have to do is talk, right? Might as well do it somewhere more comfortable." "Okay." Brian lifted his head slowly, looking like a man who'd given up on life itself. He grabbed his documents, stuffed them into a folder, and stood up wearily. "This kid is going to be the death of me." Damian and Brian sat in the cafeteria, both dressed in their suits. Other students who were present couldn't help but sneak glances toward them. It was Sunday, and everyone was dressed casually without their uniforms. So two people in formal suits sitting in the cafeteria were bound to attract attention. What's more, one of them was a member of the student council. Yes, Damian had already become a well-known figure inside Stormhold Academy, thanks to the many controversies surrounding him. "You're quite the popular person inside the academy, it seems," Brian said as he noticed the attention they were receiving. "While that may be true, your suit has an SFD logo on it. You're also drawing plenty of eyes." Damian sipped his coffee casually. "I'm used to it," Brian shrugged. "By the way, you're a commoner from what I remember. It must have been quite an unsettling experience for the nobles here at Stormhold Academy, I assume." "From what I know, no commoner has entered the student council for the past few decades." Damian frowned slightly. "This again, don't tell me even you guys have interests in such childish things. Are you a noble as well?" Brian took a sip of his coffee before replying. "I'm a commoner, but I didn't study at Stormhold Academy. There are many emerging academies with similar strength these days, though I suggest you don't consider this social construct as childish. Nepotism and power struggles between nobles and commoners are very real. These struggles become even more filthy the moment you step out of the academy." "And why is that the case?" Damian looked genuinely confused. So far, he'd found no logical reason for there to even be a class division between the two groups. "There are so many reasons that it's almost impossible to list them all. I'll just share my experience with you." Brian leaned back in his chair, his expression growing more serious. "You and I both belong to the northern part of the Federation, where there isn't much issue related to these things. But every other region is basically filled to the brim with bias and bad blood between the two sides. The 13 imperial families hold the most power in the world, as you've probably already figured out. Below them are nearly 100 noble families. Even below them are thousands of subordinate families loyal to the nobles." He paused to take another sip of his coffee, then loosened his tie slightly before continuing. "The common population might not come across nobles that often, but those who study in prestigious academies and hold important positions later in life are in direct contact with them almost constantly. In the academies, the top rankers have the rights to acquire better skills and weapon arts, and nobles inherit their strong talents with each generation through their bloodlines. Some even have innate skills from birth. They grow up in an environment where they're taught principles and concepts about aura and its uses, whereas commoners only learn all this after entering the academies." Brian's expression darkened. "So in essence, while the commoners are still figuring out how everything works, nobles have already started improving their strength and gaining more skills and arts. Some families even have weapon arts exclusive to themselves. The starting line is already unfair. Even the geniuses among the commoners rarely manage to rank high enough to gain access to better resources because of this." Damian listened quietly, finally starting to understand what the so-called suppression by nobles really meant. What nobles think is that everyone was given the same starting line, but they've never lived a commoner's life, so they don't understand what's basic knowledge and what's precious. The entire academy experience makes commoners bitter about their situation. Even if someone is very strong, the nobles find ways to suppress them somehow, either isolate them socially or make them their subordinates. They offer benefits like skills that these students can't acquire through their low rankings, making them feel grateful. But these are just kids entering the world. They don't know that everything has a price tag attached to it. Brian's face grew even more bitter, as if he'd suffered the same fate in his younger years. Commoners take the free resources provided and feel gratitude toward their friends, but only later do they realize that they need guidance for these resources as well. They become dependent on the one who provided them and slowly turn into subordinates. It doesn't sound all that bad at first, but these guys are thrown into battlefields with the task of protecting their masters. If the nobles they serve are cruel, even their wives or sisters become playthings. A very sharp look unfolded on Damian's face after hearing that, but he kept himself quiet and continued listening. I won't say much more, but I can tell you one thing. The laws and rules of the Federation are not fair to commoners. I joined this department hoping that I could make a change someday, but people like me are just turned into dogs. Brian chuckled bitterly, his expression filled with helplessness. You were right the other day. Maybe your old friend who had the same name as me was also a dog like me. Brian was speaking a lot today, letting out emotions he'd probably kept bottled up for years. Damian wondered if it was because he was exhausted or something else. There are crimes and things I've seen. I can't say or do anything about them. But never, I mean it when I say this, never become a subordinate to a noble. You don't want to gamble on whether your master is good or not. I've seen my friends lose all their dignity, respect, and self-worth. His hands tightened around the coffee cup. Commoners, except for us in the northern region, are scared of nobles and the power they hold. Not just because they're jealous, but because every commoner you come across has a sad story related to nobles. But although many nobles are worse than humans, there are many good ones as well. For example, take the Murdoch family. People genuinely love them, and even their subordinate families are very much respected. Almost all 13 imperial families have maintained their public image very well, but there are bad eggs everywhere. We never know who might have disgusting filth underneath their saintly facade. It can't be that bad, right? Why haven't people gone after them if that's the case? Damian asked, looking a bit skeptical. Government departments and the Federation were made to keep these families in check. They try to prevent major atrocities and maintain a delicate balance. But these families have spies everywhere. After all, power is the most important foundation for everything. Brian paused, then his expression lightened slightly. But it's not all that bad. There's a place where these social constructs and filth have no place at all. The military, Damian said in a knowing tone. Yes, the military. Their main goal is the protection of all human beings from the monsters beyond the portals. Even high-ranking nobles and commoners live and die together for this common goal. They serve as a strong deterrent to everyone who tries to cross the line. Your Professor Serafina is one such example. She herself is a noble, but it's a well-known fact that she doesn't like them. The reason she joined the military in the first place was to sever her ties with her family. But noble ties can't be cut so easily. Both of them discussed for a long time, their coffee cups gradually becoming empty. I see. Thank you for clearing up many of my doubts. Damian stood up, stretching his back. Today was a very good session, Brian. You're not as bad as I used to think. Give me your contact details. I might seek you out whenever I need another therapy session like this. He chuckled lightly. Only then did Brian remember that this was supposed to be a therapy session, where he needed to figure out if there was something wrong with Damian's mental state. Somehow, It had turned into a session where he provided the kid with knowledge about the world. This kid. Also, Damian's voice dropped slightly as he leaned forward. Don't stress too much about the incident last night. Maybe some kind person decided to help you out. From now on, you can relax a little. Damian said this with a meaningful look in his crimson eyes, then turned and left the cafeteria under the curious gazes of the other students. Brian remained seated in his chair for a long time, staring blankly at his coffee cup. He'd already suspected that yesterday's events might be linked to Damian somehow. But he couldn't understand how an E-rank awakener could take out so many C-ranked enemies. He'd thought maybe Damian had taken help from his family. His father seemed even more powerful than him, after all. But his colleagues had informed him that Damian's family was still in the northern region. And from the eyewitness accounts and blurred photos, it was clear that the one responsible was a young man. Beep, beep. As he was thinking about all this, his phone buzzed on the table. Hello. Brian answered the call as he stood up to leave the cafeteria. Have you found out who killed all the Shadow Council members last night? Ashley Blackheart's calm voice came through from the other side. Brian wanted to say that he suspected it was Damian Valcor again. But his mind went back to the conversation he just had with the kid. There are some people inside the SFD trying to protect the Shadow Council. Damian's voice whispered in his mind like a snake coiling around his thoughts. No suspect as of yet. We only have a blurry photo of the criminal, and I think it must involve some kind of underworld power struggle. For the first time since Brian had joined the SFD, he lied. If Damian had known that he'd planted such a seed of doubt in a righteous officer's mind, who knew what face he'd make. I see. Anyway, try to find out who was responsible for this. I don't want rogue vigilantes roaming the central region. Ashley Blackheart's voice responded after a brief pause. Yes, ma'am, but shouldn't our focus be on the Shadow Council itself? Brian asked, confusion evident in his voice. You don't need to worry about that. Just focus on finding who was responsible for yesterday's crime. Her voice sounded absolute, like an order that left no room for discussion. Crime, is it? Okay, Brian responded, a bitter expression settling on his face. He looked up toward the sky to see dark clouds hovering overhead. It's probably going to rain. What about your ongoing assessment? Have you figured out what's wrong with that Valcor kid yet? Ashley's voice now carried the tone of someone who was certain there was something wrong with him. He seems fine to me. Brian's voice sounded lighter as he replied. What do you mean he seems fine? Don't you remember the data I showed you alongside his recent behavior? Brian, I know for sure there's something wrong with him. I need you to find out what it is so we can take him into custody. Ashley's agitated voice came through the phone. Clearly, she was starting to get annoyed by his answers. And why are you sure something is wrong with him? Brian couldn't hold it in any longer. Have you ever actually talked with him besides that interrogation? Instead of focusing on the Shadow Council, it seems to me that you're more interested in going after this kid for no apparent reason. And the kid has committed no crimes. So what he does and what he doesn't do has got nothing to do with the SFD. What are we? A moral police? Who gets to decide what's right in the first place? Brian's voice rose as he lashed out, all his pent-up frustration spilling over. He'd be blind not to notice the patterns by now. There was indeed something wrong with the SFD ever since this organization got involved. It seems to me that you're tired from last night's investigation. You should get some rest. We should connect later. Ashley's voice paused before she spoke in a completely emotionless tone. I'm sorry for losing control over my emotions, ma'am. It seems the stress is getting to me. Brian apologized quickly and cut the call. He stood there for a moment, staring at his phone. Sigh, all these years of service. thinking I was making some kind of change, and all it took was one kid to wake me up. Brian was filled with complex emotions. Sometimes, people live a lie consciously, just to avoid being hurt by the cruel reality. As Damian was heading back toward the dormitory, Annie suddenly blocked his path. "If it isn't my junior brother, you're really hard to find these days," Annie said in a teasing way, standing in front of him with her arms folded and a playful smirk on her face. "Hey, Annie," Damian greeted her as he stopped. "Call me senior sister," Annie pouted, "and go to the shooting range. Master has something he wants to talk to you about." She gave him a quick once-over, then turned and headed back toward the training center without waiting for a response. Sigh. Damian headed toward the shooting range without stopping. He wondered if Professor Blackwood had found out about his attack from yesterday. If there was anyone who could connect the dots after finding just a bit of information, it was him. After all, Damian had used the weapon art the man himself had taught him. After walking for a bit, he soon arrived at the shooting range and saw Professor Blackwood watching something on a hologram. Damian moved closer, and sure enough, the guy was watching a video of his last attack. The video showed a bright flash of light streaking toward the top of the skyscraper, before obliterating it completely in a massive explosion. "Do you realize your mistake?" Professor Blackwood asked as he turned around to face him with a serious expression. Damian stood silently, his face expressionless. He braced himself for whatever lecture was coming. "What kind of face are you making, my stupid disciple? I'm asking you why you didn't tell me you'd already mastered the first level of Omega Point." Salazar pointed toward the video with an almost offended look. "Huh." Damian stood there, completely stupefied. He'd thought this guy was going to ask him why he'd blasted a building in the center of Tranquil City. But who would have thought that this madman was just irritated that Damian hadn't informed him about his progress? "What, huh, you idiot? I told you to come seek my guidance once you mastered the first level." Salazar scowled at the dumbfounded look on Damian's face. "I only mastered it yesterday." "Come here, show me by replicating that shot." Salazar turned and led Damian toward the shooting area with an eager stride. Damian followed, pulling his gun from the holster. "Shoot that mountain in the distance. Do that same area-wide attack, not the concentrated one." Salazar gestured toward a distant peak with barely contained excitement. "Sigh, all right." Damian sighed as he looked at the eager expression on his mad teacher's face. Then he turned his gaze toward the mountain in the distance and started pouring every trace of aura he had into the gun. He focused all his willpower and intent into the bullet forming at the barrel's tip. Omega Point seed shot. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled the trigger. Boom! The bullet streaked through the air like a miniature comet before slamming into the mountain. The explosion was catastrophic. Debris flew in every direction as the entire top half of the mountain was obliterated into nothingness. A massive cloud of fire and dust engulfed the peak, leaving only a gaping crater behind. Salazar's face lit up with pure joy. "Brilliant, absolutely magnificent. Apart from me, only you have ever managed to create such a beautiful seed shot. It shows how excellent my teaching really is." He looked like a proud father watching his son succeed. "Thank you." Damian looked at the overly proud expression on his teacher's face and replied awkwardly. "Come on, let's go over there." Salazar clapped him on the shoulder and led him toward a digital board in the distance. "I'll explain the principles of the second level of Omega Point convergence shot. When you master it, the bullet becomes even more powerful because it feeds on the aura present in the air while traveling toward the target." Damian's eyes sharpened with interest as they approached the board. Salazar tapped the screen, and a detailed diagram appeared showing swirling patterns of energy. Listen carefully. The first level seed shot is all about output. You pour your aura into the bullet and release it with maximum destructive force. It's raw power concentrated into a single point or spread across an area. Simple, brutal, effective. He swiped the screen, and the diagram shifted. But the second level, convergence shot, is about efficiency and amplification. Instead of just using your own aura, you make the bullet harvest the ambient aura in the environment as it travels. Think of it like this. Salazar drew a line with his finger across the diagram. The world is filled with aura. It's everywhere in the air and the ground, even in living beings. This aura exists in different concentrations depending on location. We call this the aura will gradient. High aura zones have dense concentrations, while low aura zones are sparse. But even in low zones, there's still aura floating around. Most people just can't sense or use it. He tapped the screen again, and arrows appeared on the diagram showing energy flowing inward toward a central point. Convergence shot works by creating a gravitational pull on the aura around the bullet's trajectory. As the bullet moves forward, it draws in the ambient aura from the surrounding environment and compresses it into the bullet itself. The longer the distance the bullet travels, the more aura it accumulates. Damian's eyes widened slightly. So it gets stronger the farther it goes. Exactly, Salazar grinned as if reading his thoughts. That's why this technique is perfect for long-range sniping. By the time your bullet reaches the target, it's already several times more powerful than when it left your gun. But there's a catch. He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. You need to maintain perfect intent control throughout the entire trajectory. If your focus wavers even for a split second, the aura you've gathered will disperse. The bullet will lose its cohesion, and the shot will fail. It requires incredible mental discipline and an understanding of how aura flows in the environment. Salazar straightened up and crossed his arms. The aura will gradient isn't uniform. Some areas are rich with aura, others are barren. A skilled user of convergence shot can sense these differences and adjust the bullet's path mid-flight to pass through high aura zones, maximizing the energy absorbed. That's the mark of a true master. Damian stared at the diagram, his mind racing. So I need to not only maintain my intent, but also guide the bullet through the optimal path. Exactly, Salazar nodded approvingly. And that's why this technique takes time to master. It's not just about raw power anymore, it's about control, perception, and strategy. You need to develop a sixth sense for aura density in your surroundings. He clapped Damian on the shoulder again. But don't worry, you've already shown exceptional control with the first level. With enough practice, you'll get there. Now, let's start with the basics. Salazar began sketching out training exercises on the board, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher, completely absorbed in his craft. Damian listened intently, absorbing every word. This could change everything. If he could master convergence shot, his effective range and lethality would increase exponentially. And in a world where power was everything, that kind of advantage could mean the difference between life and death. It was nighttime when Damian dragged his tired body back to his room. After learning from Professor Blackwood, he'd gone to the forest behind the academy to train his abyssal slaughter weapon art. There was still no trace of the old man who taught him the art. It was as if he knew Damian would need to practice extensively before requiring his guidance again. When Damian entered his room, the first thing that caught his eye was the broken bed. "Sigh, I need to get that removed later." He didn't bother with it. He just placed the axe on the wreckage and went to lie down on the floor instead. As he tried to get some much-needed sleep, his mind wandered to the future. Tomorrow's the day when the clubs start recruiting. I didn't think much about this social construct thing before, but after understanding what it really meant from Brian, I hate that shit. Damian's face displayed coldness as he remembered the information that had slipped from Brian's mouth earlier. He'd never thought this world would be even more fucked up than his last one. He hadn't even personally witnessed any incidents related to the nobles yet, but he could already imagine what his current position must look like to them. Even his Mafia cartel back in his past life had strong principles they followed. But it seemed that when people obtained power, literally, physical, undeniable power, they became even more monstrous. I do hope things aren't as bad as I'm imagining. Let's see how tomorrow goes. Damian closed his eyes as his breathing technique automatically activated. By now, he'd already become used to running it subconsciously, even while sleeping. Soon, he drifted off as his restless dreams became active again. The next day, Damian woke up and got dressed quickly before heading toward the student council room. Many students glanced in his direction as they whispered amongst themselves. By now, he'd already become used to it. But what he didn't know was that, on the forums, many posts filled with wild speculations about him were spreading again. And this time, the rumors included claims that he was a criminal under supervision by the SFD. To back that claim, someone had posted a photo of him and Brian sitting together yesterday in the cafeteria. Although many people debunked the claim as false in the comment section, it was still clear that he was connected to the SFD in some way. Not to mention, everyone had seen the news about the Quinton skyscraper being attacked 2 days ago. One particularly crazy post even claimed that Damian was the one responsible for the attack. But people only laughed at the poster, saying Damian wasn't nearly strong enough for something like that. No one believed such ridiculous bullshit. What they didn't know was just how accurate that post actually was. As Damian entered the council room, he found Elizabeth alone for the first time since he'd started coming here daily. "How have you been recently, Damian?" Elizabeth, with her purple hair and eyes, looked as beautiful as ever as she smiled upon seeing him enter. "I've been feeling surprisingly good, actually. I hope you're doing well too." Damian replied with a small smile. Elizabeth looked genuinely surprised. "You must be feeling really good for you to even smile a bit. That's a rare occurrence." She said this with awe written all over her face. "I smile quite often, you know." Damian's smile vanished instantly. "No, you don't. You always wear that brooding expression on your face as if the whole world is your enemy." Elizabeth said this in a tone that suggested she was absolutely certain of it. "Is that not the case?" Damian whispered in a low voice as he moved closer and sat down on the side where the disciplinary committee seats were. "I'm not your enemy," Elizabeth replied after hearing him say that, a complex expression crossing her face. Damian stayed quiet as he studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned forward on the table and whispered again. "I heard from your brother that you have a seer skill. I wonder if that's why you've been behaving so strangely around me. Maybe you saw some visions about me that made you treat me differently, but I'd like to give you a little advice, since you've been kind to me from the day I arrived." Elizabeth didn't interrupt. Her face became more serious as she also leaned closer across the table to listen. "I recently learned about the social construct and how commoners are suppressed by nobles. I know your family is a bit better than most, and you treat everyone the same, but that doesn't change the fact that both of us stand on opposite ends of a spectrum." He paused, his crimson eyes locking onto hers. "Starting today, I plan to interfere with every injustice done to commoners in this academy, and I really don't want us to have problems with each other, so I'm going to be as blunt and honest as possible." Elizabeth's expression remained calm, attentive. "The attack that happened on the Quinton skyscraper, that was me. I killed several C-rank awakeners using my weapon art, and in our council hell in this entire academy, There are probably only 3 B-ranked awakeners, including you." He leaned even closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I'm telling you this honestly so you can warn your entire year, as well as the other nobles associated with you. No one should mess with me. I really mean it. I've killed many people in just a few weeks since I awakened, and I don't know if I'll hesitate to harm students as well if they cross my limits." Elizabeth kept listening to Damian's confession with no visible reaction, her hair partially covering one side of her face. After a moment of silence, she spoke. "I understand what you mean, Damian, but let me give you a bit of advice as well, since I consider you my friend." Her violet eyes sharpened. "There's a huge difference between the quality of awakeners who study in prestigious academies like ours and those whom you killed. Don't underestimate anyone." "I'm not underestimating anyone." Damian interrupted her, his tone firm. "They might be able to inflict damage on me. They might even kill me, but their bodies aren't strong enough to survive the amount of damage I can inflict either." Damian already knew what Elizabeth wanted to say, so he cut her off. Silence settled between the two of them. The air felt heavy. Tick. Both of them turned sharply toward the door to see Naomi standing there, with a panicked expression on her face. I didn't see anything." Naomi looked at how close Damian and Elizabeth were, both leaning toward each other across the table, and a wild thought immediately came to her mind. They. Both Damian's and Elizabeth's faces became awkward as both of them glanced at each other. "Don't misunderstand, Senior Naomi." Damian cleared his throat. "The president was just providing me with details regarding the Shadow Council." I see." Naomi sighed in relief and quickly walked over to sit at her seat, trying to act natural. Damian stood up and excused himself, heading toward the attached kitchen room to find Robert, while Naomi and Elizabeth quietly talked amongst themselves behind him. As Damian entered the kitchen, he found Robert guiding the staff on how to prepare breakfast. Robert was the same as ever, dressed in his butler suit, with his gray hair meticulously combed. Damian had gotten a bit closer to him over the past week. Everyone in the council, except Elizabeth, Gareth, and Ariel, had been isolating him to some extent since the day that argument happened. So usually, Damian would just sit quietly at the table, eat his breakfast, and head back to his training without a word. Seeing Damian enter the kitchen, Robert greeted him warmly. Good morning, Sir Damian. You should have just called for me. I would have served you your breakfast directly." "No need for that, Robert. And stop calling me sir already, would you?" Damian replied helplessly. The old man never seemed to listen. He walked toward a small table placed in the corner of the kitchen, where the staff usually ate, and sat down. "I'm sorry, sir, but I will continue to address you that way. Consider it a habit of my profession and please pardon me." Robert smiled gracefully and gestured an apology before continuing. "And please, seat yourself at the student council table. This place does not suit a person of your esteemed standing." "Old man, I'm a commoner. Don't worry so much. And can you not talk normally with me? Or is it that you talk this way even with your wife?" Several staff members preparing food couldn't control their laughter, but they quickly wiped the smiles off their faces as soon as Robert shot them a sharp glare. "Sigh, all right." Robert brought Damian's food over and sat down alongside him at the table. They engaged in light conversation as both of them ate their breakfast. The other staff members had already taken food for the other council members and gone to serve them. "From now on, I'll be eating here only. I don't want to ruin my mood every day by eating where I'm not wanted." Damian finished his meal and stood up. "All right, I'll head back now. Have a nice day, everyone." Damian left the kitchen and entered the council room, where a discussion was already underway. Robert watched his back silently. If one looked closely, they would see pity reflected in the old butler's eyes. He already knew about Damian being isolated by others. So the disciplinary committee will be responsible for handling any disputes that arise today while the recruitment takes place. When Damian entered the room, Elizabeth was addressing everyone. Take your aura jamming bracelets from the lockers. Today, you might actually need to use them. Damian ignored everyone's gazes as he simply retrieved his bracelet from the locker and slipped it onto his wrist. He couldn't be bothered to explain his absence during the majority of the meeting. All right, club's committee members, you can go organize the recruitment event. Disciplinary committee members stay behind. Soon, Gareth led Victor, Mitchell, and the others out of the room. Before leaving, Victor shot a sharp look toward Damian, which was completely ignored by him. This guy is starting to annoy me. As Damian was occupied with his thoughts, Ariel's voice snapped him back to attention. Damian, I made a team group earlier for communication during the event in case anyone needs assistance. I'll add you there as well. Damian nodded and gave her his contact information. Listen up, everyone. Ariel's gray eyes swept over the room. This event happens every year and a lot of fights occur. I want all of us spread around the campus and ready to provide assistance. When you encounter anyone using aura, make sure you use your bracelets and de-escalate the situation. But don't be too heavy-handed. Her gaze paused especially on Damian. All right, you can all head out now. Damian nodded and left the room alongside the others. This is really boring. Damian roamed the campus area, which was far more decorated today thanks to the club setting up colorful stalls to recruit new students. All around him, he could hear seniors trying to attract attention with bizarre advertisements. Join the Sword Club. This is the destination for all your swords. Archer Club is recruiting. We have the most female members, so hurry up. Adventure Club, where the road to your conquest starts. Oratex only recruits those who have the brains to understand its value. Stupid people get lost. Hearing and watching the seniors desperately trying to impress new students to join them, Damian felt like he'd entered some kind of scammer's market. Instead of focusing on them, Damian turned his attention to the aura jamming bracelet on his wrist. So, from what I know, these bracelets only work on low-level awakeners, although Elizabeth provided no explanation as to why. It's because anyone who has a strong will can resist its effects. Aiko, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke up to help Damian again. How does that work? These bracelets release a strong wave of energy that affects the mind and disrupts a person's thoughts, resulting in them losing control over their aura. People strong enough to have the willpower to resist won't be affected by it. So only people below B rank are vulnerable. Aiko's mature, feminine voice explained clearly. I see. As Damian was pondering this, he suddenly received a message from Edrin. When he opened it, his eyes sharpened immediately. His aura began to fluctuate slightly. Boss, we've gathered the commoners who share similar ideologies, but it seems the nobles have found out about our gathering. We're currently in the gymnasium, but many nobles are creating issues, and they seem to have called seniors as well. Finally, it took them a long time. Damian started rushing toward the gymnasium as soon as he finished reading the message. Inside the gymnasium, two groups were currently engaged in a tense standoff. My Tilda, look what we have here. Commoners having a little gathering. Leonard led one group of about 20 first-year students from Section A, clearly all nobles, as he confronted Edrin's group of 60 people. What is it you want? Edrin stood firmly in front of the commoner group, which was a mix of students from all sections. Almost all the commoners from Section A were among them. Leonard smirked, crossing his arms. What do I want? I'm just curious, that's all. What exactly are you all planning here? Some kind of rebellion?" His tone was mocking, condescending. Edrin's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "We're just meeting to discuss forming a support group for commoners. There's nothing wrong with that." "A support group?" Leonard laughed mockingly. "Is that what you're calling it? Sounds more like a pathetic attempt to organize against your betters." Murmurs spread through both groups. One of the nobles behind Leonard sneered. "You commoners should know your place. Forming groups like this will only make things worse for you." Edrin's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Where is he? We need him here." The tension in the air thickened as both sides stared each other down, waiting for someone to make the first move. Edrin's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We're not doing anything wrong. We have every right to gather." "Rights?" Leonard cut him off, his gray eyes gleaming with amusement. "You think you have rights here? How adorable." He took another step forward, and his aura began to flare, thick, oppressive, suffocating. The pressure hit the commoner group like a physical wave. Several students in the back stumbled backward, their faces going pale. "Leonard, stop this." Edrin's voice rose as he tried to push back against the overwhelming aura. "You're breaking Academy rules." "Am I?" Leonard tilted his head mockingly. "I'm just talking. If you're feeling pressured, maybe that's just because you're weak." Behind him, the other nobles began to laugh. One of them, a tall boy with slick-back hair, stepped forward with a cruel grin. "Why don't you commoners just disband this little gathering and go back to licking boots where you belong?" "Fuck you!" Ronan Hale's loud voice boomed across the gymnasium as he stepped forward, his broad shoulders squared. "We're not going anywhere." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Leonard's smirk vanished, replaced by cold fury. "What did you just say to him?" Before Ronan could respond, Leonard moved. He was fast, blindingly fast for a first-year student. His fist slammed into Ronan's gut with the force of a sledgehammer. "Gah!" Ronan doubled over, the air forced from his lungs. "Ronan!" Edrin and Lysa rushed forward, but the nobles were already moving. Chaos erupted everywhere. "Get them!" The nobles surged forward like a pack of wolves, descending on prey. Edrin barely managed to dodge a punch aimed at his face, his glasses nearly flying off. He countered with a quick jab to the attacker's ribs, but another noble immediately grabbed him from behind. "Let go!" Edrin twisted, trying to break free, but the grip was too strong. A fist slammed into his side. Then another. "Edrin!" Lysa screamed. She moved to help him, but a female noble with twin braids blocked her path, sneering. "Where do you think you're going, commoner trash?" The girl's leg swept out in a vicious kick, aimed at Lysa's knees. Lysa jumped back, narrowly avoiding it, and retaliated with a palm strike to the girl's shoulder. But she wasn't fast enough. Another noble, this one a stocky boy with a sneer, slammed his elbow into Lysa's back. "AGH!" Lysa crumpled to her knees, gasping. All around them, commoners were being overwhelmed. The nobles fought with precision, confidence, and cruelty. Every strike was meant to humiliate, to injure, to break. One commoner boy, barely 15, was thrown to the ground. A noble kicked him in the ribs repeatedly, laughing. "Stay down, you piece of shit." Another commoner girl tried to fight back, but two nobles grabbed her arms and slammed her against the wall. "Stop, stop!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. They didn't stop. Blood splattered on the polished gymnasium floor. Screams and shouts filled the air. It was chaos, absolute brutal chaos. Ronan staggered back to his feet, clutching his stomach. His face twisted in pain and fury. "You fucking bastard!" Leonard stood in front of him, completely unbothered, his hands in his pockets. "What's wrong? Can't even take a single punch. and you call yourself an S-rank talent." Leonard's voice was calm, almost bored. Ronan roared and charged forward, swinging a wild haymaker. Leonard sidestepped effortlessly and slammed his knee into Ronan's ribs. Crack! Arg! Ronan collapsed again, coughing blood. Pathetic! Leonard looked down at him with disgust. Edrin finally broke free from the noble holding him and rushed toward Leonard, his fists clenched. "Get away from him!" Leonard turned just in time to catch Edrin's punch with one hand. His grip tightened like a vice. "You really think you can touch me?" Leonard's golden eyes gleamed with malice. "You're S-rank, sure, but I'm SS rank. After training for a few days, I'm already at F+ rank while you are stuck with a minor rank below mentioned. There's a difference you'll never understand." He twisted Edrin's arm violently. "Gah!" Edrin gritted his teeth, trying not to scream. Lysa, despite her injuries, forced herself to stand and launched herself at Leonard from the side. But Leonard saw her coming. Without even letting go of Edrin, he kicked out sideways, his boot slamming into Lysa's stomach with brutal force. She flew backward and crashed into a group of commoners, all of them tumbling to the ground. "Lysa!" Edrin's voice cracked with desperation. Leonard released him with a shove, sending him sprawling to the floor. "This is the difference between us," Leonard said coldly, looking around at the bloodied, beaten commoners. "You were never meant to stand on the same stage as us. Accept your place." Tears of frustration and rage streamed down Edrin's face as he tried to push himself up. His glasses were cracked, his lip was bleeding, his entire body ached. But more than the pain, it was the helplessness that crushed him. "We can't win. All of them have higher ranks than us. Even those who have talent as us are more used to controlling aura than us. Is this the gap in the foundation between us? We can't just cover it up in a few days. We need time." Around him, commoners were being beaten down one by one. No matter how hard they fought, no matter how much they struggled, the nobles were just stronger. It wasn't fair. It had never been fair. Suddenly, the gymnasium doors burst open. "What the hell is going on here?" A commanding voice echoed through the hall, cutting through the chaos like a blade. Everyone froze. A girl stepped into the gymnasium, tall, broad-shouldered, with shaved sides and long hair tied back in a tight ponytail. Her disciplinary committee badge glinted under the lights. Mara Kestrel, 3rd year C rank. Her sharp eyes swept over the scene as she caught sight of the bloodied commoners, the smirking nobles, the destroyed gymnasium. "Everyone stand down," she barked. She raised her wrist, and with a single press of a button, the aura-jamming device activated. A wave of energy rippled outward from her bracelet. Instantly, the aura flaring from both sides was suppressed. Several students stumbled as their energy was forcibly cut off. Leonard clicked his tongue in annoyance, but didn't resist. The nobles slowly backed away from the commoners, smirking as if they'd already won. Mara strode forward, her boots echoing loudly against the floor. She looked around at the carnage, her expression hard. Then her eyes landed on Edrin, Ronan, and Lysa. All three of them were bloodied and beaten. "What happened here?" Mara demanded. Leonard stepped forward smoothly, his hands still in his pockets, his expression calm and composed. "These commoners gathered here and started provoking us. We were just defending ourselves when they attacked first." "That's a lie," Ronan shouted, his voice hoarse and filled with fury. Mara's eyes snapped to him. "Watch your tone, 1st year." "They attacked us," Ronan continued, ignoring her warning. "We were just having a meeting and they came here to start a fight. Look around, look at who's injured. It's all commoners." Mara's gaze swept over the room again. It was true. Almost every commoner was bruised, bleeding, or on the ground. Meanwhile, the nobles barely had a scratch on them. But her expression didn't change. That doesn't prove anything, Mara said coldly. You could have provoked them verbally. Nobles don't just attack without reason. Without reason, Ronan's voice rose even higher, disbelief and rage mixing together. Are you serious right now? Edrin grabbed Ronan's arm, trying to pull him back. Ronan, stop. But Ronan shook him off. No, I'm done staying quiet. He glared at Mara, his eyes burning with fury. This is exactly how it always is, isn't it? Our seniors already warned us about this, but we didn't understand. Nobles do whatever the fuck they want, and people like you, people from the student council, always side with them. You suppress us, you ignore the truth, and you let them get away with everything. His voice echoed through the silent gymnasium. Lysa, still on the ground, looked up at Mara with tears in her eyes. He's right, you're not even trying to listen to us. Mara's jaw tightened. I'm trying to maintain order. Bullshit, Ronan spat. You've already decided we're guilty just because we're commoners. Mara's expression darkened. She stepped forward, her presence intimidating. I said watch your tone. Or what? Ronan stood his ground, his fists clenched despite his injuries. You gonna beat me up too? Go ahead, prove me right. The tension in the air was suffocating. Mara's fist clenched at her side. Then without warning she moved. Her fist shot forward, aimed directly at Ronan's face. Ronan's eyes widened. He was too injured, too slow to dodge. Smack! But the punch never landed. A hand, firm, steady, caught Mara's fist midair. Everyone froze. Slowly, Mara's eyes widened in shock as she looked up. Standing there, his crimson hair slightly disheveled, his crimson eyes cold and sharp, was Damian Valcor. He held her fist effortlessly, as if it weighed nothing. The entire gymnasium fell into stunned silence. Damian's voice was low, dangerous. That's enough. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.